Hello there, this is Null Inquisitor, and today I'm going to talk about the nature of challenge. I've watched recently, yesterday I think, Ivan Mike's video on swashbuckling. He mentioned things about the Three Musketeers in relation to our All for One game. He mentioned his love for Sinbad, um, how he learned the swashbuckling genre and how he came to it. He mentioned also that he liked the possibility of failure in swashbuckling or heroism, and also that the swashbucklers are all about attitude and that kind of stuff. Um, Not necessarily about skills or competence, but more about attitude. so So I wanted to talk about swashbuckling, but more about the nature of challenge, a thing I discovered many years ago. As you may know me, I'm a superhero guy. I love swashbuckling, 7C, DC Comics, Marvel, Valiant, all sorts of superheroes universe. And I have a couple of things to say about heroism and also the nature of challenge. So, a hero. What is a hero? If we begin looking online, we can find that a hero is somebody who is looked for, somebody who is admired for his courage, his achievement, his virtue, um, his noble qualities. In classic mythology, you have those like Heracles, Hercules, or Bellerophon, or Perseus. And you have the equivalent in the modern day mythology, such as Batman, Superman, Spider Man, Ellen Ripley. You have equivalent for these guys. So the notion of courage, the notion of being exemplary, competent, is something that comes in various shades, various spectrum, but it's somebody who does the right thing, often to his own demise or his own disadvantage. There's a notion under courage of sacrifice, the sacrifice of the self, of its life, but also sacrifice of money, family, time, energy, effort, wealth, mental health. A hero will do the courageous thing and will give something, never to gain something in return. To think of it, maybe most D&D character aren't hero after all, since they want the reward, the gold, the title, maybe the exceptional paladin in the side. Some may not want the glory. There's also the notion of being exemplary, competence. This is where I might disagree with on a just on a personal taste level with Ivan, that heroes are competent. They are capable of achieving greater things. But there is a more importantly being exemplary by representing an ideal, whether it's courage, whether it's honesty, having strong morality. And there's also the notion of, in classical mythology, of possessing godlike power or superhuman prowess. So there's all kind of heroes. If we look at how the mythologies, modern, classical, and real life, a hero is somebody which people look for, and an example in being human. And a great example of modern mythology, of course, is Superman. He's the symbol. I think there was a study that said that the Superman logo is the most recognizable logo on Earth in any culture, maybe followed by some big corporation, but the Superman logo is very, very known. It's well known. And there's this idea floating around the geekdom or the internet or in the culture itself that Superman is boring because he has no flaws, and that he is difficult to write for because he is flawless. But I'm here to say that maybe only less skillful writer cannot write about Superman. A guy like Alan Moore could produce something with Superman, but Neil Gaiman would produce something very easily with Superman because he's used to write about gods. He understood the nature of challenge. And I'll get to that in a moment. But Superman is not flawless. He's vulnerable to magic, cynics, kryptonite, and high-powered energy. He's vulnerable to the lack of sun. If he cannot nourish himself with the sun, the radiation of the yellow sun, you just wither and become weak. He's got virtue, ideals. He has this moral code from Kansas, very down-to-earth American value, but he upgrew this moral code to become this champion of the human race. He's got family, friend, a girlfriend. He's got people who he care about, companions, other heroes. He's got this love for their human species, and he would do anything for it. So he's not difficult to write for if you think of it in this way. You have to understand what is the nature of a challenge for this guy. And for every genre on the spectrum, from the realistic firefighters, 25 points character in GURPS with surely risk every bones in his body to save someone from a fire, to the other extreme, a Superman-like character who fight Darkseid in a one-to-one match. The nature of challenge changes with genre. And once you understand your genre, you can produce pretty significant challenge for your character, even if he's godlike. So, for example, if we switch to the lower side of the spectrum, Batman is detective noir, swashbuckling, street justice, all rolled up in one. So there's a couple of rules to understand about Batman. He's just a guy. He's in peak physical condition, mentally very on the high end of intellectual capability. He's capable to fight henchmen, nameless henchmen, one at a time with ease. He can fight maybe 4 guys at a time with ease. But 12 at a time with machine guns, this is a big challenge, even for a character like Batman, especially if he is unprepared. But if he has time to prepare, he will use ruse and his intellect and gadgets to get himself out of harm. But Batman has limits. Maybe that's why he's a more popular character, because his limits are more easy to understand or to relate to, you know. He's just a guy, he's just a dude. In some psychological way, he is you. He is yourself exploring that universe. In the swashbuckling genre, it's very close to that. At least in the typical modern swashbuckling genre, that I will maybe date back to the early 30s. Um, Guys like Doc Savage, like The Shadow, even Dick Tracy, if we if we want to be silly. Nameless in this genre, nameless minions are not important, so they should be easy to fight and in group. In this game, we have together the All for One Regime Diabolique. There's kind of a dichotomy here. The game is about swashbuckling, but it's also about horror. It's about ourselves playing big bad heroes, but the game is about being a victim. It's about being the prey. So the game is juggling with these two notions, and it's easy to fall on one side or the other. And mechanically, the game lends itself more to a, a fragile balance. It's easy to become a prey in a supernatural confrontation, and characters are barely above the normal norm, the normal human. I think my character has two stats of 3, and a 2 is a normal Joe, normal bloke. So even my guy is supposed to be this monster hunter, but he's barely a monster hunter. He's just a guy who knows better, but if it wasn't for these specific talents, it would be a mess. So regarding the possibility of failure in Ivan Mike's video and about the nature of challenge, we're playing a game, we're playing a role-playing game. So the possibility of failure has to be there. It's no game if we don't have this possibility of failing a role, that's for sure. But the possibility of failure in doing what? This is the question that I'm interested in. The possibility of failure fighting nameless minions in a swashbuckling game, to me, should be very low. Should be very, very low. The possibility of getting my ass kicked by a couple of nameless dudes should be very low in a game like this, even if it's teamed with the horror genre on top of it. It's just that way. It's just my personal preference. But one could see the game a bit more on the realistic side of the spectrum, as Ivan Mike mentioned. So it's important to understand the type, the genre, the bracket on the spectrum that your genre is trying to emulate, and where your players might have different expectation than you when you run a game. As the type of challenges change with genre, the type of activity a hero will attempt will also change. So when confronted with a higher challenge earlier in my game master career, and I'm wearing this RoboCop shirt, which is very appropriate. This guy is like nameless minions. We see him beat the shit out of nameless minions in the film, but named characters are more suited for him as a challenge. They have special guns and access to his program codes and restriction. So when I was running games, I started on this quest for a realistic game when I was young. I was playing Heroes Unlimited, and the games clearly state that this is a thinking's man's game. You have to use your noggin. It's OSR in this way, this game. And I played not Heroes Unlimited, but Marvel superheroes before that. So there was quite a challenge there, but my young mind was all about, ooh, this is a realistic, this is complex, this is cool. So I went in that direction and stumbled upon GURPS later on. So I was all about realism. Maybe it was in a way my inability to deal with different challenges. And once I stumbled in the early 2000s upon 7C and realized upon reading it that challenges could be different, I understood stuff about myself, my paradigms, and I realized that I had limitations. Even if I was an avid superhero fan, I was all crazed about realism and the 90s in comic books where was called the Iron Age. It was a dark period. Every superhero had multiple belt pouches and guns and dark leather clothes, and it was a dark time in comic books. It gave us the Dark Knight and Watchmen and so much good story, but it was a very dark period of time, and I was eating all that thinking that superhero were like that all the time. With the early 2000s in comic books became more contemporary, more modern, return to the classical Silver Age a little bit, became more hopeful, colorful, and became a blend of all these flavors that we know from history in comics. So I realized reading 7C and later Mutants and Mastermind 2nd edition, I've realized that I had limitations as a game master. I was eating that realistic pie wholeheartedly, and I was missing the point. Superheroes are supposed to be a little bit more superheroic, godlike, superhuman. So since then, I've shifted my paradigm, and since then, I've ran cosmic level superhero campaigns with ease. When you know the nature of challenge, of the genre you are trying to emulate, challenging heroes become very easy. And you may allow your player to do what could be seems as very hard stuff for normal human. But it's okay, it's not the genre. Reality is not the genre you are trying to emulate in your game. It's different. It's farther on the scale of cinematic action, and so it's about finding that spot. I used to say when I played GURPS superhero back in the day, the combat are a little bit cinematic, but everything else is realistic. Nowadays, I would simply probably say that I run mostly 4-color superhero game, but even then, it's not just what I do. I ran Paragon games, which was very realistic, even in combat. So, and even using a 4-color game, but it was approached as reality meets superhero. So I don't define myself like running just one type of game now, but I would say that my default increased in flexibility. So when you realize, and I'll end the video here, when you realize that it's not about levels, it's not about hit points, it's not about multiple abilities, it's not even about reality itself, that the nature of challenge in your genre appears. And it's generally simple things, just on a new scale. So thanks for watching, and happy gaming.